I taught my son how to change a tire, how to shake a man's hand, and how to show up when somebody needed him. I never thought I'd have to teach him what to do when his own wife wouldn't show up for me. Turns out he figured that part out without any help from his old man at all. Welcome back, family. If you're new here, glad you found your way to us. Drop a comment and tell me what state you're watching from tonight. Hit that subscribe button before we get going. Let's get into it. My name is Walter Grissom. I'm 67 years old, and I live alone now on Cedar Hollow Road, outside Millbrook, Tennessee, in a house I built with my own two hands back in 1979, back before my knees started arguing with me about stairs. My wife Ruth Ann passed 8 years ago this coming spring, and I've been on my own since, which is its own kind of quiet you don't get used to so much as you learn to live inside of. I still keep her garden going out back, tomatoes and butter beans mostly, because she'd have skinned me alive if I let it go to weeds. I still sleep on my side of the bed, even now, because the other side never did feel like mine to take. I raised one son, David, just the one. Ruth Ann wanted more, but the good Lord had other plans, and David got the better end of that deal, if you ask me. Because there wasn't a thing in this world I didn't pour into that boy. Taught him to bait a hook by the time he was 5. Taught him to drive a stick shift in the church parking lot when he was 14, both of us laughing so hard the first time he stalled it out that a deacon came over to see if we were all right. When his mother got sick with the cancer the first time, back in 2015, David drove 4 hours round trip every single weekend for treatments, sat with her through every infusion, held a bucket more times than any grown man should have to for his own mother. I watched him do that without complaint, without once making it about himself, and I thought, there it is. That's the man I raised. That's the whole of it right there. So you'll understand why what happened this past November sat on me the way it did. David's 41 now. Good job as a project manager at a logistics company up in Knoxville, about 50 minutes from where I live. Married 9 years to a woman named Christine. I want to be fair to Christine here, because I was fair to her for 9 years. Gave her every benefit of every doubt a father-in-law can give. She's got a good job herself, works in medical billing, drives a newer SUV, keeps a clean house, and for the first few years I thought she was good for my son. Steady, practical. I told myself the parts of her that felt cold were just her way, that not everybody wears their heart where you can see it, and I let that slide for longer than I probably should have. Looking back now, I understand that patience and blindness can wear the same coat, and for a long time I couldn't tell which one I had on. It was a Thursday night, the 13th of November, about 9:45. I was sitting in my recliner watching the news with the sound down low when I felt it start in my chest. Not sharp. Not the kind of pain you see on television where a man clutches his shirt and goes down dramatic. This was a tightness, a pressure sitting right in the center of my chest like somebody'd set a cinder block on it, and it was crawling down my left arm, slow and steady, and my jaw had gone to aching in a way I didn't like one bit. I've buried enough friends from this church to know what that particular combination means, and I know it means you don't wait around to see if it gets worse. My truck, a '09 Silverado that's been more loyal to me than most people I've known, was sitting up at Cutshaw's garage getting a new alternator put in. Had dropped it off myself that very morning. So there I was, no vehicle in my own driveway, a fist closing slow around my heart, and one phone call I could think to make that made any sense, because David lived the closest of anybody I still call family, 50 minutes up the interstate. But Christine, I knew, had that big SUV of hers sitting right there in Knoxville, 20 minutes closer to me than an ambulance dispatched from the county seat would have been on a Thursday night, with half the county's volunteer service already out on another call, which the dispatcher told me straight when I rang them second. Right after I couldn't raise David on his cell, I called my son first. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Same thing. I found out later he'd left his phone charging in the kitchen while he ran to get gas. A plain enough explanation that didn't do me one bit of good sitting in that recliner with my chest feeling like it was caving in. So I called the house line, and Christine picked up on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed before I'd even said a word, like the ringing itself had put her out. "Christine, honey, it's Walter." I'm having some real bad chest pains, and my arm's gone numb, and I can't raise David. My truck's at the shop. I need somebody to come get me, or call it in for me. I don't know which is smarter right now. My head's not thinking straight." There was a pause on her end. Not a shocked pause, not a scared pause, a considering pause, like she was doing arithmetic in her head that had nothing to do with me. "Walter, I've got an early morning tomorrow. I've got a huge closing to prep for at work, and David's got his truck, not me. I don't really see what you want me to do about it from here." "Christine, I think I'm having a heart attack." "Then call 911, Walter. That's what they're for. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not an ambulance." And she hung up. Not slammed it, near as I could tell. Just hung it up soft and final, the same way you'd end a call with somebody trying to sell you a warranty on a car you don't own anymore. I called 911 next, obviously. And I want to say plain and clear to anybody listening that I do not fault that woman for telling me to call them, because that part was true and sound advice on its face. What sat wrong with me every day since was the tone underneath it, the specific coldness of it. She had a car. She had 2 working legs and a driveway with nothing in it but that SUV, and Cedar Hollow Road wasn't but 20-some minutes from her door. Millbrook Volunteer Fire and Rescue got to me in 11 minutes, which is a fine time for a county our size, and I will be grateful to those boys until the day I die, whenever that day finally does come. Young fellow named Cody Ferris rode in the back with me, kept a hand on my shoulder the whole way, kept telling me, "Stay with me now, Mr. Grissom, you're doing fine," even though I don't imagine he had any earthly way of knowing whether that was true or not. That's the kind of lie a good man tells you when you need it told. Turned out to be a genuine heart attack, not the kind you walk away from with just a scare and a pamphlet about diet. They had me in the cath lab inside the hour, put a stent in what the doctor called my left anterior descending artery, told me afterward, plain as you like, that if I'd sat in that recliner another 20 or 30 minutes deciding what to do, we'd likely be having a different conversation, or no conversation at all. David got there around midnight, hair every which way, still in the shirt he'd worn to work, and I have never in my life seen a grown man look that scared. He'd come home from getting gas to find his phone blown up with missed calls from the hospital and from Christine, who I gather told him some version of events that made her look considerably better than the version I'd lived through. He sat by my bed most of that night, same as he'd sat by his mother's, and he kept apologizing for something that wasn't rightly his fault at all, and I let him, because there wasn't any use correcting him at 2 in the morning with tubes running out of my arm. I didn't tell him what Christine had said. Not that night. I just let it sit there in the corner of that hospital room with the 2 of us, the way you let a wound scab over before you go poking at it to see how deep it runs. They kept me 4 days total. David came every single one of them, sometimes twice. Christine came exactly once. On the 3rd day, stayed maybe 25 minutes, brought a bouquet of grocery store flowers already starting to wilt at the edges, and spent most of that visit on her phone answering emails for her big closing, the one she'd told me about on the telephone the night I liked to have died. I watched her from that bed and I thought about my Ruth Ann, God rest her, and how she'd have sat in a hospital chair for a solid week straight if it'd been my mother-in-law in that bed instead of me, because that's simply what you do for family, and I understood then that Christine and I had 2 very different dictionaries for that word. They sent me home on a Monday. David drove me himself, set me up on the couch with the remote and a week's worth of my pills laid out in one of those plastic organizer boxes his mother used to use, and he sat with me a long while that afternoon before he had to head back to Knoxville. And it was sitting there, watching my own son fuss over me the exact way I used to fuss over him when he had the chicken pox, that I finally told him not to turn him against her. I want to be clear about that. Same as I'd want anybody to be clear about their own motives in a moment like that one. I told him because he asked me straight out, sitting right there on my own couch, "Dad, why didn't Christine come get you that night? She had the car." And I wasn't raised to lie to my own boy, especially not laid up in a recliner with a fresh scar on my chest. So I told him the whole of it, told him what she'd said, near enough word for word as I could recall it through the fog of that pain, told him about the annoyed sigh before she'd even heard what was wrong, Told him about the pause, the arithmetic I could hear her doing in the quiet on the other end of that line. David didn't yell. That's not his way, never has been, takes after me some in that regard. He just went real still for a minute, jaw working, and then he said, "Okay, quiet as anything," and changed the subject to the Titans game, and I let him, because I understood he needed some time to carry that weight around before he set it down anywhere. Now here's where I need to back up and tell you something I hadn't put together myself until I was laid up in that recliner with too much time and too little to do but think. 6 years back, when David and Christine wanted to buy their first house together, a nice enough place in a subdivision outside Knoxville, they came up $18,000 short of what the bank wanted for a down payment to avoid the mortgage insurance. I had that money, Ruth Ann's life insurance mostly, sitting in a CD at First Millbrook Bank, drawing about as much interest as a dead battery, and I didn't think twice. I co-signed the loan, and I wired that $18,000 straight to their closing agent, and I never once brought it up again. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not on a single one of the birthdays I've sat through since. Christine took full credit at every family gathering for how she and David had worked so hard and saved up for that house. And I let her have that story, because it wasn't about the credit for me. It was about my boy having a roof that was his own, but being a co-signer on a note. And I'll tell you, the same as that bank teller told me the following week, means your name is attached to that obligation with certain rights that don't go away just because you were too polite to mention them for 6 years running. Sitting in that recliner Tuesday morning, 1 week to the day after I nearly died in it, I picked up the telephone and I called First Millbrook Bank and asked to speak with a loan officer, a fellow named Gary Teasdale I've known since he was in short pants at this very church. I didn't call to hurt anybody. I want that understood plain. I called because it was my legal right as a co-signer to inquire about that note, and because I'd started to wonder, lying awake at 3 in the morning with a scar healing on my chest, whether I was the only one in that marriage who ever thought about what family actually costs when it comes time to pay it. Turns out, and Gary walked me through this slow and careful like he does everything, that as a co-signer with equal standing on that original note, I had every right to request my name be released from the obligation going forward, provided David and Christine could show the bank they qualified to refinance the remainder on their own income alone, which by every account they surely could, both of them earning good steady money 9 years into that marriage. It wasn't a punishment. It was, Gary told me, just paperwork, the kind of paperwork that gets filed every single day by co-signers all across this country once the original need for a co-signer has passed. Per the bank's own policy, once that request goes through, they're required to notify all parties on the loan of the change within a set number of business days, standard, as Tuesday follows Monday. That notice reached Christine's inbox that Thursday afternoon, the same day of the week, I noted, as the night I'd nearly died in my recliner. I didn't find out how it landed until that evening, when my own phone lit up with a call from David. "Dad, what in the world did you do? Christine's saying the bank's requiring us to refinance now, out of nowhere, and she's spooked because our rate's gone up 2 full points since we bought, and she wants to know why your name's suddenly coming off everything." I asked the bank to release me from the note, I told him, plain and even. Same as I've told him most everything his whole life. That's all I did. Wasn't looking to punish anybody, David. I just got to thinking, laid up after nearly meeting your mother again sooner than planned, that I ought to look after my own affairs, same as everybody else in this family looks after theirs. Silence on his end a good long while, then quieter. "Is this about what Christine said that night?" "I expect you'll have to ask her that question, son, not me." He drove out to Cedar Hollow the very next evening, Friday. Sat across from me at my own kitchen table, the same table his mother used to roll biscuit dough out on every Sunday morning of his childhood, and he asked me to tell him the whole thing again, slower this time, every word of it. And I did, because a man deserves the truth laid out plain when he's finally ready to hear the whole of it, and not just the parts that are easy to carry. And then he told me something I didn't know. Said that when he'd gotten home that night from getting gas and seen all those missed calls, Christine had told him a version where she'd offered to drive me herself and I'd told her not to bother. that I'd rather call an ambulance anyhow. Stubborn old man that I am. Said she'd painted herself as the reasonable one and me as the difficult one, and he'd believed every word of it for a full week, right up until he sat on my couch and asked me straight, and I told him straight back. She lied to me, Dad. About the whole thing. About all of it. Seems that way, I said, and I didn't dress it up any prettier than that, because it didn't need dressing up. It needed to sit there plain on the table between us, same as the biscuit flour used to. He went home that Friday night and, according to what he told me after, the two of them sat up till nearly 1 in the morning at their own kitchen table, and for the first time in 9 years of marriage, David said. He watched Christine run clean out of a version of events that made her look decent, watched her try 3 or 4 different stories on for size, before she finally just went quiet, because there wasn't a story left that fit the facts of that Thursday night and the facts of that lie she'd told him after. I didn't ask him to leave her. I want that said clear, because that's not a thing a father gets to decide for his son, not at 41 years old with 9 years of marriage behind him. What I told him, sitting right here in my own kitchen with coffee going cold in front of both of us, was this. David, I raised you to show up for people. Your mother and I both did. And I watched you show up for her every single weekend of her sickness, without one word of complaint. All I'm asking you to think on is whether you're married to somebody who'd have done the same for you, or for me, or for anybody who wasn't directly convenient to her that particular evening. He filed for divorce the 2nd week of December. Quiet about it, same as everything David's ever done. No shouting, no scenes. Just a lawyer over in Knoxville named Patterson who handled it clean. Christine kept the house, far as I know, refinanced it just fine on her income alone, same as the bank said she could, which tells you the whole request was never about the money to begin with, just about a father wanting his name off an obligation to a woman who wouldn't drive 20 minutes to keep him breathing. I don't wish Christine ill. I mean that the same way I'd mean it about anybody. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. I just don't have to sit at a holiday table across from her anymore, pretending I don't remember the sound of that pause on the telephone, the arithmetic she was doing in her head, while my chest was caving in on itself 20 minutes from her driveway. David comes out to Cedar Hollow most every Sunday now, same as he used to before he got married, before the Sunday visits got whittled down to holidays and the occasional obligation. He mows what needs mowing, sits with me on the porch a good while, and this past Sunday, he brought a chessboard his mother used to keep in the hall closet, and we played 2 full games out there in the cold, with our jackets zipped up, not saying a whole lot, just being 2 men who'd been through something together and come out the other side of it still standing. My truck's fixed now, alternator good as new, sitting right there in my own driveway where I can see it from the porch. And Sunday evening, after David had headed back to Knoxville, I sat out there a while longer by myself with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, and I thought about that Thursday night, about the fist closing around my heart, about the sound of a phone hanging up soft and final on a man who thought he might be dying. And I realized, sitting there in the quiet with the porch light buzzing above me the way it's buzzed for 40-some years now, that I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't satisfied either, not in the way you might expect from a story like this one. What I was, mostly, was at peace. The same kind of peace Ruth Ann used to talk about after she'd finally cleared out something in the garden that had no business growing there in the first place. If somebody in your life makes you dial 911 alone while they weigh whether you're worth 20 minutes of their evening, you remember that. You remember it clear. And you remember it long after they've apologized and tried to explain it away as a bad night or a misunderstanding. Some nights don't need explaining. Some nights just tell you plain who was going to show up for you all along and who never really intended to at all. That's the story tonight, family. If it moved you the way it moved me telling it, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments who showed up for you when you needed it most. I read every single one of them, and I mean that.